My name is Joshua Woodward. I'm a software engineer at eBay, but I'm not representing eBay. I actually run a Google developer group, if you've heard of those. I just moved to the Bay Area 4 months ago. I used to run a developer group in Fresno, so that's where I'm involved with a lot of Google developer technologies. And AngularJS was started at Google by Misko. I'm sure you're all familiar with him. So let me get started. So this is the AngularJS logo. Everybody's seen this before, right? I think they went with this logo because of their tagline. It's a super heroic JavaScript framework. And so they probably got the idea from a shield or something like that, right? And if Misko was here, I'd try and convince him to come up with a new logo. I'm not too good with Photoshop, but that's the extent of my Photoshop skills. And I'd also provide a new tagline that it's a badass mother effing framework. So if you've used Angular, you probably agree with me that that's pretty badass. And that's the end of the jokes. So this talk is titled Single Page Applications, but it's more of an introduction to AngularJS, so sorry about that. But I will cover the routing and route parameters and stuff towards the end. So AngularJS doesn't really have new ideas. It just took a lot of good ideas from other places and packaged them up into one thing. So one idea is templates. Angular does it on the client side. So if you're familiar with like Django or something like that, where it's templated on the backside and then delivered with your HTML. Here you can see you have a model, which is scope.user, and a property name. And then in the template, you have the data binding with the double curly braces. And that's what is in the view. And then down here at the bottom is your result from that data binding. Which brings me to the next topic, data binding. So one cool thing in Angular is the data binding, which binds a model to most likely an input box in this case. So you can see from this, I have scope.user again, and then let me highlight that. And then I have a model, and that's where the binding happens. It's telling Angular that this input box, the value in this input box is bound to this scope.user object. And so you can see I also have a click event. I'll explain that later. And all it does is alert what scope.user.name is. And you can see it's blank. And if you change it, without doing much other work, you've bound that variable, you've bound that value to that, that model. And this is all the code that is taking place on this slide. There's no extra, on key, all the framework handles all that kind of stuff. So another concept is two-way data binding. So instead of just updating a model, you can also update the view. And highlight that there. So you have scope.user as your model, and now you've binded it with your input box, but I've also added now to the view some data binding, and that's where you get the two-way. So the view updates as well as the model. And you can see that here, that it happens instantly like that, right? Real quickly, I want to show a new, I don't know if it's a new idea, concept, or just a new term, but three-way data binding is now like your model, your view, and your database all getting updated instantly. And so there's a product out there called Firebase. Let me see here. I have this. Let me exit full screen here. So I have this puzzle written in Canvas, and this demo is like from 1 to 10 on awesomeness, varies on the Wi-Fi. So the Wi-Fi sucks, so the demo might suck. But it's just a canvas, and you can tell these are two different browsers. And so let's see how good the demo is. But basically, I have a view, and I'm updating a backend Firebase, and it really sucks. So there's a huge delay. But basically, I'm just setting XY coordinates across, and it's all getting updated from the internet, and the internet sucks, so it's real slow. If you had good internet, it's like instantaneous. So that's a concept of three-way binding. It's really good for real-time apps. Another concept in Angular is dependency injection. So if you need something in Angular, you inject it via one of these through this method. There's a lot of services pre-built, but you can write all your own services in Angular. It's very modular, so it makes it real nice. So that's just to show. I won't explain this, but that's how you would get access to other services in your item. Another concept is directives. There's also a lot of built-in directives, and you can write your own directives. In this example, all it's doing is basically creating a new variable as it iterates over an array, and then binds that variable to the template. And what this whole thing is doing is repeating that whole list item for every item in the array, and that's the result that you get. So that's one example of a directive, and the ng-click is also another one that I'll explain. So that was a quick intro, and then I'll break down what makes up an Angular app. So first of all, you have to load the library. I recommend using a CDN for it because one, if you're not developing locally, it opens up a slot when downloading, because you can only download so many things at once from the same server. You can win free cache. So the CDNs do a very good job of caching the library. So now if another person visits and they happen to be going to the same file, they already have it on their system and they don't have to download it again, and it's much faster. And this one happens to be Google's CDN, and I'm pretty sure they don't go down too often. So it's pretty safe to use that. Okay, so when you first create an Angular app, you use the directive ng-app, and you're basically telling Angular where your app lives. In this example, I'm using the whole HTML document, but you can also just put it in a specific piece of your app, because Angular works very well with other frameworks and stuff. So you can put it in, just like start small and put it in a small like weather module or something that you want to use. And basically you have to do that to tell Angular, hey, this is where my app is. Whoops, too fast, went back. This is just again showing the template binding and how AngularJS is I say model view controller only because there's this term controller here. A lot of people others say like model view whatever, model view view whatever, model view view model, model view, a lot of stuff. You can do model view star, I guess, but to me it's obvious that it's model view controller just because you have a view, a model, and a controller. So that's my argument. Whoops, what? I just upgraded to Mavericks. I don't know if I should have done that. Okay, so again, in my first example on the ng repeat, I just hard-coded the array inside there. But here I have a model with the array hard-coded again as well. And I like doing this for prototyping apps, because then I could simply now tie this to a service, make an HTTP request, and then just change scope.basket to response, right? As long as I'm expecting an array back. But it makes it very easy to build lists of items. Okay, so what happens when you first come to an Angular app? Obviously, a request is made to your website. The index file is delivered. AngularJS, the JavaScript loads and then waits for the the page to fully load, and then it looks for that ng-app directive. After it finds that, it traverses the template looking for directives and bindings, and it does its magic. Your app is then bootstrapped, is the term. Oops, I thought there was one more bullet point. Guess not. So that's how it's constructed. Okay, so let me talk about a little bit of the directives. ng-bind is a directive. In Angular, you can use the double curly brace as your binding method, but you can also use the ng-bind directive and put your model in there. Both of these work exactly the same. Angular does this because it's very similar in other templating frameworks, and you can control what this parameter is. So like for this demonstration, I'm actually using curly brace bracket curly brace so that it works and doesn't actually bind these. You can customize that bind. And the reason you would want to do this method, most likely in your index page, is because when it first loads, your user might see the curly brace. The user might see this for a split second because Angular hasn't completed traversing. So on your very first page, it's recommended to do this way so that it's just blank. Otherwise, they'll see this, but it's for a short second. Unless you're on, Moscone Wi-Fi, then it could be 30 seconds or something. Okay, so another thing in Angular is the form directive. You just have to make a form, really. You don't have to do like ng form. But the cool thing is, so I have this model that's just a boolean, and I'm tying it to this checkbox right here instead of a input box like before, or like instead of a text field like before. And then I've actually bound it to the template so you can read it and see what happens. And the magic of Angular automatically updates that stuff. So you can use this boolean value to change other things. Like, let's see if I go there. It's like 3 slides from now. I'll explain it. Another thing is you can do inline expressions in your templating. So, and there's actually, let me back up. There's filters built in. So say you have an app and you want to put in a date field or a number field and you want it formatted. Angular can do all that automatically for you. So here I have like a tip calculator, which is like, I could have either done that or a to-do app, I guess. Those are the two things that people do a lot. So here's a tip calculator. If I put in the bill amount of $5.45, everything happens pretty instantly. This binding here takes the bill amount, and instead of _, I just did ×1 because it's quicker. and adds it to the, okay, so actually what's happening is when it changes, it's doing this calc tip function, which calculates the temp amount. Then the bill and the tip amount get added. That makes more sense, right? And then there's a filter currency. So you can see that I'm just doing basically an integer or a float, and it formatted it correctly for me. I didn't do any extra. This is actually all the code that's happening. There's no extra stuff going on behind the scenes. So it makes it really easy to build apps really fast, because right in the template I'm adding the two numbers together. So if they change, everything gets updated instantly. Unless, so that's really cool. Another thing is ng show and ng hide. In this case, I'm doing ng show. So like in the previous example, the amount was there, even when it was, or the label kind of was there, even when the field was empty, which is not really, good user experience. If you use ng show, as long as this is true, or a truthy value, then the label will show. So that's the only difference between these two. Oops, where'd my mouse go? I lost my mouse. Oh, there it is. So as I start typing, tip amount becomes a truthy value, and then it shows the label. That's the only thing I changed in between those two examples. So that's a good way to provide better user experience. And you can use this for lots of different scenarios, like in a checkbox example, you could have a checkbox that shows and hides a div or something, and it makes it real easy. All you do is ng show, and then the model that the checkbox is bound to, and stuff like that. Another directive is ng class. So ng class, basically, you can use expressions or boolean values here, and as long as it is truthy, it will bind that class, or it will add that class to that element. So in this example, I have a span here, and I'm using the ng class directive, and I have these three checkboxes, and they're all defaulted to false. I like to default my values so I know that they exist. You don't have to put these here. As soon as you check it, it'll add that to the scope. It'll create that model on the scope for you, but it's nice to have this there so you know what you're expecting. But what happens is when I check bold, isBold becomes true, so then the bold class, which is just setting the font weight, gets applied to this span element. So just by clicking that, I can do that. And italic and underline is this very similar thing. So, oops, wrong keystroke. So let's just take a look real quick at that span here. And zoom in there. Oops, too far. Okay, so if I uncheck all these boxes, you'll see class is empty, and as I check them, Angular appends it to the class list. So that's all happening through the framework like magic and stuff like that. Automagically is the right term, I think. Okay, so that's all I have for slides, but I will show the routing and stuff like that. So give me 1 second here. Okay, I'll close this puzzle down. So how many people are familiar with GDGs? Anybody? Nobody? Nobody? One person. So I'm sorry?
Kevin Nelson?
Yeah. So GDG is Google developer groups, and they meet and talk about Google technologies like Angular and Android and Chrome and everything else. There's a group here in San Francisco There's groups in East Bay and South Bay and stuff like that. So check that out. It's just developers.google.com/groups. But last week we had a Dev Fest, which is like a larger event. It was an all-day conference, very similar to this. And I built their website using Angular. So we can take a look at the code for this. And I was smart enough to put it on my local host, so we don't have to worry about the Wi-Fi. If we pull up the code here. So in Angular there is a service called Route Provider. And with that, that's how you do a lot of the single page stuff. You can, so you use the when method, and you pass the URL that you're expecting, the path that you're expecting. So I have 3 paths set up here for like the new schedule and speakers. And then you use a template URL, and that's the HTML of your view. And then you have a controller, and that's the Angular controller that you want to use for that scope, basically. And so in this case, when you are on the home page, which is the root, I'm using a home control which has nothing in it but a language file, because GDG is like worldwide, and I shared this template was open sourced. I don't have the language file on here. Interesting. Oh yeah, I do, right there. So I just used some variables to replace out some common words, so that like the Ukraine just changed this out to their native language, and it works. So when I hit speakers, you'll see the URL changed, but the page actually didn't reload. Angular intercepted that, went out and got my view, my HTML for that, and put it into the ngView directive. So one thing, the way you would want to build a single page application is stuff that's going to be on every single page. So like my navbar, basically. My navbar and the backdrop is on every single page. The only thing that's changing is my inner content. You have an index HTML file, and you use a ngView directive, and Angular will use that route provider and put it inside that ngView stuff. So the way I kind of architect it is I have a views folder, and I make separate HTMLs for every page, basically, even though they're not really pages. So for instance, let me look at the schedule HTML. So this is all the code that it took to build this schedule page. So there's a lot of time slots there. Basically all I'm doing is using the ng repeat directive, and for every slot in the schedule, do this whole block, right? And that's how you can copy elements super easy. And then there's some other logic in there for slots that had more than one speaker or not. But basically, it could have been just this without all the logic, and it would have made this whole page, because these are just list items that it's repeating over and over and over. So it makes it real fast. And this is just based off of a static JSON file. So I just designed my my model first, and then I designed the UI a little bit. That's pretty much that. So then a little bit more advanced technique is route parameters. So just for this demonstration, I actually added this page. So if the URL is speaker,
Can you please run back the font a bit?
I'm sorry?
Can you increase the font size?
Oh, yeah, I don't know how. There's a way to change it in here. Sorry. Let's see if this works. What, 20? Oh, it won't let me change. There we go. It won't let me change it. I would have. I tried. In the UI? In the editor? I don't think it does that. No. Nope. Anybody else use WebStorm? Know how to pinch it? Oh! Oh! Yeah! Perfect! Thanks for that. Nice! Perfect. Can you see that? Can you see that now? Okay, so, as I was saying, if you add this colon to the beginning of a parameter, it becomes like a variable. So in this case, I have a speaker and a speaker ID, and I'm using a view that's an HTML file. I wanted to say HTML5 called speaker detail, and then I have my speaker detail control, and that was the wrong keystroke. So if I go back to my speakers, you can't see it when I hover over, but it's the URL now is speaker 0, right? And so what it did was in the controller, now that you can see it, I'm passing the route parameters, I'm injecting the route parameters service, and basically whatever I called it up here is now that variable name down here in route parameters. So I can sit there and in my view use that, oh, pinch, let me see. There we go. I like that. I can use that variable speaker ID. So now I'm just going through my same data model, which was speakers JSON, and grabbing it by its speaker ID. And I can prove that that works and that that wasn't just vaporware by clicking somebody else's name. So speaker 1, speaker 2, and obviously I just did this real quick actually a few hours ago. I would have like speaker bio or some more information inside of there, and you can make speaker pages, and this is all based off of this index. There's an index.html, so everything after this hash is actually using the route provider.
Does that go into your web history?
Yes, it should be. Yep. There's some tweak. There's sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. I don't know why. I haven't figured that aspect out. If you don't, I did figure that out actually. If you don't put a sorry, wrong HTML. If you don't put a slash in between here, so like this would work. This would actually work. So let me save that and refresh the interface here. It's localhost, come on. Oh yeah, true. It's probably waiting for Angular to download. Okay. So let me just verify. Yes, so that changed, but I don't know, maybe it didn't refresh right. It wasn't working earlier. Now it's working. There we go. So you can't see it. See, now I'm trying to go back. It's really tiny down here in the like, you know, at the very bottom where it tells you what your URL you're trying to click on is. It's #speaker/7 instead of #speaker/7, right? And so if you do that, Angular intercepts that and then adds it here, but you didn't see that, like it happened really fast, and that messes up your history, right? So now I can't go back. But if we change it back and put a slash in there, it works identical as far as what you see, right? What you're expecting, the expected behavior is identical, but the history works properly, like you would expect. So, and then I can go back.
Question?
Yes.
So you stored all your templates as separate files rather than as partials in the index.html.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's an Angular application, but not a single page application because you are requiring another server round trip. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it depends on your, you know, if you want to look at it that way, yes. I will agree with you.
So how do you load the tail links, the deeper links? Like, does that load index.html? Does everything go to index.html and Angular automatically figures it out?
Yeah, so in my navigation, I just have the links, and then the route provider does that. So if I fix these to make them work like they should, yeah. So I just have a link to #/speakers, and it does it. The AngularJS route thing does it. Yeah, there is a HTML5 mode to get rid of. You can make this whatever you want. You can make it a hash bang if you want. You can make it whatever you want. There is a HTML5 mode to get rid of that, but I haven't played with it enough to figure out. You got to do some server-side stuff. So
You just have to basically redirect everything back to your Angular.
To your index, yeah. You have to do some server-side stuff. There's different techniques. You can do it in like the htaccess file and catch it that way, or if you have some routing on the server side, you can do it that way.
Is it straightforward to, like I work on an application, so we have the main part of the application has a good amount of JavaScript, but for example, we have, you know, users section and stuff for management where I don't want the application JS to load. Is it straightforward to segregate those with the routes?
Yeah, so like, yeah, my favorite thing to just, because I am, Angular's pretty new, so I don't really think that there's too many like experts in the field. But a really good thing to look at, it's on Wi-Fi, so it's going to suck. But if you go to Bounty Source and their GitHub, there's a repository front end. Their whole entire site is written in Angular and Bootstrap, and it's all open source. And they have a pretty huge website, so that's a very good place to look to find, you know, try and copy or whatever, and get some best practices and some ideas and techniques. It's Bounty Source is the company, so it's bountysource.com, but they have a GitHub, and the project is like Bounty Source -front end, something like that. But it's all, their whole website is open source.
Can you talk about different strategies for creating or integrating backends to all of this?
As
so, like,
far
let's say you weren't using a JSON file, and you actually wanted to have something that could be some sort of database that you could dynamically update and change as things went on. What would you recommend that works well with Angular?
Everybody likes that slide, right? I like that slide. So Firebase is a good real-time data store, like a NoSQL data store. There is also a is it called NG? Do you know what I'm talking about? It's the okay. What is it called? But basically, NG resource. There you go. NG resource. If you have a RESTful API, it makes it real easy to change data back and forth. And somebody said sometimes. So, yeah.
Is it possible to prefetch or precompile the templates?
I believe so. Yes. I haven't done that yet, but I'm pretty sure that you can do that. Again, I'm not an expert.
There's a website called egghead.io.
Egghead.io is run by John Lindquist. He's a developer advocate at JetBrains. He's got like 50 videos on YouTube up there. And that's by far one of the best places to start learning Angular is egghead.io. So, any other questions?
So in your console, you have, or the Google Web Development Console, you had AngularJS section.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this is a Chrome. This is a Chrome extension called Batarang, and so basically you can. It helps you debug your AngularJS app. You can get some idea of what the model is on the page. So for Batarang, I think it's BATARANG. Let's see. Look it up. AngularJS Batarang. Mm-hmm. Can you see that? Can I pinch and zoom on this too? No. AngularJS Batarang is the that plugin, and you can also see dependencies. It does a nice little thing like that. Obviously, I don't have any in here. Let's get this back to. Let's get this back to 0 here. There's all kinds of little tools in here to help you debug your application. Any more questions?
Talk about a little bit. Do you use services and factories and stuff? Like the difference between the two? 'Cause
I don't know the difference between the two. I don't think any. Yeah, it's I don't get it, but I do. I just stuff that I've read. I think factory is, to me, what I've understood it is factory is something that you're gonna make like one time and you want to share it or something, and the service is by like updates, and then you can update it between controllers.
like your resource stuff where this might be a service.
Yeah. And there's other functionalities. There's another one. So there's factory service and provider. So I haven't done enough extensive stuff in that sense. It's been a lot of simple stuff like this that I've done. So like I'm at eBay, I'm like work on internal stuff on the tool team. So I usually I get to build graphs. So it kind of sucks, but yeah.
Talk on D3.
Yeah. So
Can you share the source for that demo that you
the slides, yeah, the slides are on
the website that you were working on?
this one.
That's possible.
Yeah, it's all front end code, so you can just go to devfestwest.com. And you can find actually, if you go to, let's see if the internet works. Oh, it's working. Hold on. It's almost there. No. Trick. Told you. It actually works much better off of my phone. I set up a hotspot on my phone and it works much better. We'll see. But github.com/gdg-x is a like play on the Google X project, right? So the Google developers, there's a bunch of us that build some projects for other organizers, and if you this DevFest template is all that code actually, so you don't have to try and steal it from here. It's actually up here. and it's all Angular. I believe this is the latest stuff. Yeah. So you can look at that one too. That's from this one. And then this presentation is on, let's see if it works, is ngguide.com/AngularJS talk. I don't know if you can see that. I need to get that thing where you can zoom in on parts of your screen. But it's AngularJS-talk. So the code for the slides are up there.
Is it N-Guide or NG-Guide?
ng-guide.com. Let me see here. Let me help you out here. There we go. Can you see that? It's kind of dark. So yeah, this was a website I intended to kind of do something like Egghead.io, but I don't have time, so it sucks. Any more questions?
How partial do you work in Angular?
No idea. I've never touched them.
Last question. Have you done web components in Angular?
Not in Angular, no. You can just do directives. It's very similar, right? So instead of being an attribute on an element, you can actually make a directive that element, so you can have whatever. Thanks.